Hey book lovers, Victoria here and you're watching My Books Me. Today, in honor of my 22nd birthday, which is this Wednesday, I thought I would share with you guys 22 book recommendations. I did a similar thing last year for my 21st where I shared 21 book recommendations. I thought I would do it again. I'm pretty sure a lot of the books on this list are the same as they were last year, but obviously that just means they're really good books that I definitely think you should check out. On Wednesday, which is my birthday, I will actually have a blog post up that will link to all of my reviews that I've done for all of these books. And to where you can get them in their Goodreads, so stay tuned for that. It will be linked in the description on Wednesday. If not, definitely just go check out my blog because the reviews are all up there, I think, for the most part, for most of these books. So let's get into it. I want to make this video as quick as possible, so I'm not going to go into great detail about what these books are about, but just why you should read them. First up, we have Nevernight by J. Kristoff, the first book in the Nevernight saga. This is great if you love fantasy assassins. It's a new adult fantasy series. There is quite a lot of swearing in this, and there are definitely some smutty scenes in here, but if you like that, definitely check it out. We follow Mia Caravelle, who is attending the Red Church, which is essentially Hogwarts for assassins, because she wants to avenge the death of her father by killing those responsible for his hanging. It's a really great read. The second book, God's Grave, just came out earlier this month. I am currently in the middle of reading that and really enjoying it, but if you love assassins, kick-ass female lead, Hogwarts for assassins, and a little bit of smut, then definitely check this out. Then we have A Girl in Between by Anna Daniels. This is a contemporary adult novel about this woman who is in her early 30s, I think it is, and she is at the crossroads in life. She's between relationships, she's between jobs, she's between living situations, and it's about her just kind of trying to decide what to do next with her life and the path she wants to take. It's really funny. I definitely recommend this if you are Australian because there is a lot of great Aussiness in this. This is an Australian author and it is set in Rocky, and it's just a really good book. It's hilarious, and I definitely feel like this is something that you should check out if you are interested in getting into more adult books, because it does feel very much like a young adult or a new adult book. The next book is Frostblood by Ellie Blake, the first book in the Frostblood saga. This is another YA fantasy that also has a bit of rebellion in it. It has been targeted to fans of Red Queen, and I can definitely see why. We follow Ruby, who is a fireblood who has the ability to control fire and heat, but she is living in a Frostblood world, you know, obviously the complete opposite of her, and her kind are sought after and killed. She is captured, but she is saved by these group of Frostbloods who want to try and bring down the Frost King, and they think she is strong enough to do it. There is a little bit of romance in here. There is a lot of kick-ass femaleness in here. There's another really great YA fantasy that I definitely think you should check out. The second book recently came out this month as well, and while I haven't started that one yet, I'm very excited to read it. So definitely check it out if you're looking for a new YA fantasy series to read. I couldn't do a recommendations video without including probably one of my all-time favorite books, and I'm sure you're probably going to have a rough idea about maybe what it is, but that is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J Maas, the second book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. This book is everything. If you haven't read this series yet, I definitely recommend it. If you struggled with the first book, or maybe you didn't like it so much, I definitely recommend continuing on to the second one because it picked up so much. The story got so much better. The characters got so much more interesting. We got introduced to a whole group of characters who are amazing. We get to see more of the world. We get to see more of the backstory and the world building. It's just so much better than the first. So this series, if you have been living under a rock, follows Feyre, who is a mortal living in the mortal world. She ends up killing a wolf, and she has to go and pay the price for killing a fae by living in the spring court with the high fae Tamlin, and there's a bit of romance in there. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. This one is so much better, and this is a Hades and Persephone retelling, and definitely so much better. I definitely recommend this series if you haven't read it already. Next book is Fallen by Lauren Kate, the first book in the Fallen series. This is another YA paranormal urban fantasy about fallen angels. We follow Luce and Daniel, who have been pretty much cursed for centuries. They are never really able to fall in love, and Luce continues to die when she is 17, either when she kisses Daniel or when she learns more about Daniel's secret and who he really is and the nature of this curse. But this time around it's a lot different. he has been able to kiss her and has been able to tell her things, and it's sort of the start of this battle between the good and the bad fallen angels, and it's really good. If you are a fan of Twilight back in the day, I definitely recommend this book. While I haven't read Twilight myself, there are definitely similarities that I can see with the tone of the story. There's romance, there's paranormal, there's fantasy, there's a bit of everything. I definitely recommend it. It's a really good series. It has received a lot of negativity, but at the same time there are some really strong fans behind it, and I definitely think it is a book you should definitely check out. Another contemporary, and this one is Queens of Geek by Jen Wild. This is a really awesome YA contemporary. We follow these three BFFs who go to SuperCon in the US. They are from Melbourne, and it is about them sort of just discovering themselves, and it's very much a coming of age story because they are nearly finished with high school and they have plans for the future, and being in this new environment sort of makes them realize who they are, and there's a lot of self-discovery in here. This is also really great because the main character, or one of the main characters, Charlie, is bisexual, and it is awesome. I definitely recommend it, especially if you want to read some more LGBTQ+ novels, and definitely some diverse novels, because Taylor also suffers from anxiety and she's on the autism spectrum, so it's really interesting if you want to read a book with all these different elements in. Next book is a really gorgeous book, and that is Caravelle by Stephanie Garber. This book is so magical that you can just feel the magic seeping off the pages. It's another YA fantasy. It's the first in a duology, although I definitely feel like this could be a standalone. So if it just didn't have the final chapter, it could very well have been a standalone. It's set in this world where every year there is this thing called Caravelle, which is like an interactive spectacle event where you can be either a part of the game or you can be a spectator and watch everyone else play the game. And our main character, Scarlett, has dreamed of being part of Caravelle for years. She finally gets the chance, and it turns out this game is a lot more personal to her because her sister is the person that everyone has to find before the end of the game, which goes for 5 nights. Between all this, she kind of falls in love, and there's some stuff that goes on. Oh, it's just a beautiful book. I definitely recommend reading it, even just for the descriptions of the setting of Caravelle. They are so beautiful and so immersive, and I would love to be a part of this game. The next book is a graphic novel, and that is The Wicked and the Divine. This is volume 1 by Kieran Gillian, Jamie McLeod, Matthew Wilson, and Clayton Cowles. This is a really interesting graphic novel series about how this is a really interesting graphic novel series where every 90 years these gods are reincarnated into the bodies of young people to become pop stars and famous in order to influence everyone. And we're in the middle of this new cycle where for 2 years they are in power and they influence people, and we have our main character, Lauren, I think her name is. She's obsessed with these gods, and she ends up befriending some of them, and she's kind of in this inner circle, but there is a lot of infighting and outfighting. It's really interesting. The artwork in here is also, where's a good page? It's just also really beautiful and bright and colourful, and this series just keeps getting better and better with each installment. An oldie but a goodie that I always try to recommend to you guys, and that is Tomorrow When the War Began by John Marsden. This is the first book in the Tomorrow series, which is I want to say it's kind of like an Australian dystopian, except it's less dystopian-ish. We follow these group of friends who go off camping for the weekend. They go off into like this little mountainous area while everyone else in their small town is going to their annual fair or show. When they get back, they realize that Australia has been invaded, and these invaders are using a little portside town and their town to slowly infiltrate the rest of the country, and doing it without people sort of realizing what is happening. So while everyone is held captive at the showgrounds, our group of misfits here have to try firstly to protect themselves, and they decide they're going to camp out, but at the same time they want to try and get back at the invaders, and they try to sabotage them in certain things. It's really, really good. It's an amazing series. It's an amazing Australian YA series. I definitely recommend it if you haven't read it already. If you are Australian, make sure you read it. If you aren't Australian, also make sure you read it. It's just a really fantastic series. You're going to love these characters and you're going to love this story, and there's also a movie adaptation of it and there's a TV adaptation of it. Just please go check it out. I can't recommend this to you guys enough. Next book is Freaks by Amanda Hocking. This is another YA fantasy. It's a standalone. This one is really intriguing. It is set in 1987 in the little town of Cauldry in Louisiana, and there is this traveling carnival that comes into town. They set up for 2 weeks, I think it is, and we follow our main character Mara, who's grown up within this carnival for her entire life. She kind of doesn't really possess any of the amazing abilities that everyone else does, but she's kind of like a lackey and a go-between. She starts hanging out with one of the townies called Gabe, and they come to realize that this town has this really weird curse about it, and people start dying and people start getting killed within this circus, and she kind of has to team up with Gabe to try and figure out what is going on, and it's super interesting. I did not see where this book was going. It's a little bit slow in places, but the way it all comes together in the end, it's just really great. It's a really good story. Definitely recommend it. Next book is one you guys are probably already all heard of and read, but that is Illuminate by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, the first book in the Illuminate files. The third book is coming out next year. I'm very excited. The main thing about this book that makes this book so amazing, I do not think it would have worked any other way, is the fact that it is told as a case file. And so we have chat logs and documents and video transcriptions and interview transcriptions, just everything that would be actually in a case file. And this is essentially what it is. You are reading the case file for what this story is about. And this one we follow Katie and Ezra, who are on two different ships within this 3-ship fleet that is fleeing their planet, and a contagious disease breaks out on one of them, and it's the computer system for connecting all three ships gets a bit damaged, and she gets a bit wonky and starts trying to actively kill people. And Katie and Ezra, as I said, are on two different ships, and they kind of have to start working together to try and save one another and save all the ships. It's really quite interesting. It just, the further along you get into it, it just picks up and gets more amazing. I definitely feel like you do have to just read this once, just to have fun with the format of this. If that's the only reason why you read it, then that's alright. But it's a really good series. I still haven't read the second book, but I'm really interested to see where this story goes and how Amy and Jay are going to finish it off next year. The next book is a collection of short stories, and that is The Turning by Tim Winton. Tim Winton is a really renowned Australian author, and I can see why in reading these short stories. What I love about this collection is that all of these stories are interconnected. Characters' stories span several of the short stories, and you get to hear about, you get references to other characters and other events that you've read about or that have been mentioned in someone else's story. They all take place in a little town near Albany in Western Australia, or in two towns, and they're sort of like, I think, thinking back, there's like two different groups that we hear from, like two different parts that we hear from different perspectives, but it's really, really good. The stories are so interesting and so beautifully written. If you're interested in reading short stories, I feel like this is a really good collection, especially because you can actually sit down and read it from cover to cover and enjoy all the stories individually and as a collection that is interconnected. There are 17 stories in here, and they're all really good. Some of them are a little bit graphic and a little bit heavy, so just please know that, but otherwise they're just really great stories, and I'm so glad I got the chance to read them. And I feel like if you want to try something by Tim Winton before actually going out and getting one of his books, I feel like this is probably a really good start, because you get like a little taste and you can read it in little bits rather than having a novel. Definitely recommended. Another graphic novel that you've probably all heard of, but we're coming up to the season where everyone's probably looking for some creepy reads, and that is Through the Woods by Emily Carroll. This is a collection of 5 short stories in graphic novel form. They are creepy in nature, although they kind of not. The stories themselves are a little bit creepy and the drawings themselves are a little bit creepy, and together they just make a really intriguing and interesting and sort of creepy story. I definitely feel like with these stories, they sort of get a little bit more twisted as they go along. The artwork in a lot of them sort of isn't that creepy, but then you sort of get a little twist near the end of each story and you're like, holy moly, this is kind of creepy. They're definitely not really they're definitely not really scary, but they will sort of give you goosebumps and maybe make you want to turn the light on if you're reading them at night. If you are looking for a book to read this October for Halloween, definitely add this one to your TBR if you haven't read it already. I'm definitely going to read it again this year. The stories, as I said, are really interesting and definitely thought-provoking in a way. They sort of go in directions that you maybe not necessarily think of, but definitely recommend it. And I'm actually really interested to see what else Emily has written or drawn, because this is just such a beautiful book. The next book is another bit of a creepy read, more of the thriller side. This is an adult thriller, and it is The Darkest Secret by Alex Marwood. This book is not only told in alternating perspectives, but alternating timelines. The bulk of the story follows where this family is going away on holiday with a whole bunch of friends, and over the course of this week or weekend, I can't remember, no, week I think it is, one of the twins dies, and it's kind of hidden, and it's hidden, and it's just this big scandal that rocked like the family and everything. And while we're getting this backstory, we've got current period where the father of these twins and these other couple of daughters have died. So one of the daughters is going with the surviving twin to the funeral, and over this period some secrets are coming out and they're sort of discovering everything, and you get to find out what happened to this girl, how she died, who covered it up, and what happened to it. It's such a thrilling and interesting book, and the way it ended, I kind of wanted more. It's such an interesting read if you're into thrillers like that, like crime thrillers, everything. It's just really interesting. You will be left thinking about the entire thing, like how did it happen, how did it get, who pulled it off, how did they explain everything. It's just really interesting to see how it all came together. The next book is a non-fiction book, and that is Note to Self by Connor Franta. This is actually his second memoir. If you're a fan of Connor, you've probably already read this book maybe, but I definitely recommend it if you haven't. It is such a personal and moving memoir at the 2 years since he wrote his first book, A Work in Progress, and everything he's gone through. The big thing it revolves around is his breakup, his major breakup, like his first major relationship breaking up and everything he felt around that. And it's so beautiful and so moving, and really about how he managed to hold himself together. He also talks about dealing with depression, not only when he was actually in college, when he first sort of was diagnosed with depression, but also how he sort of relapsed into this depression after his breakup. It's such a beautiful book. If you're a fan of Connor, I definitely recommend it. If you aren't a fan, I definitely also recommend checking it out. He just has a really beautiful way of writing. It's also got poetry and photography in here. The next book is King's Cage by Victoria Aveyard, the third book in the Red Queen series. The fourth book is coming out next May, and it is called Wallstorm. I am very, very excited. This book, it's definitely my favorite in the Red Queen series. This series just keeps getting better and better, and things keep happening that I am never really expecting. This series takes place in a world that is divided by red and silver blood. Reds are normal people and silvers have special abilities. We follow Mare Burrows, who is a red who has silver abilities, and she is sought after by the Crown, and she's initially trained up to be a silver weapon. However, she comes to learn that there are other people out there like her called New Bloods, so she is on a mission to try and firstly save the New Bloods from being killed by the new King Maven. But she also wants to train them up so she can finally take down Maven and try and take down this silver hierarchy, and it's awesome. There is a love triangle. I am Team Cal all the way. This book just gets better and better. You will be left heartbroken after this third book, but I'm very excited for the fourth one. Definitely check this out if you love, again, YA, fantasy, rebellion, love story, kick-ass female. Awesome. Then we have Heartless by Marissa Meyer. This is a standalone. It is a origin story for the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland. This book, oh my god, so beautiful, so moving. Not that I've ever read any other origin stories for the Queen of Hearts. I don't even know if Lewis Carroll ever gave us an origin story for her character, but I feel like this is such an accurate story. Like, it fits so perfectly with who she is, and why she becomes the heartless bitch that she is and that we all know and possibly sort of love. This book is so heartbreaking and so beautiful, and I definitely cried. There is romance in here, but I feel like if I tell you that, you're going to know kind of what happens. I feel like it is kind of obvious when you get into it why she ends up like this, but it's just an amazing journey getting there. I think Marissa did such a fantastic job writing this. The world she creates for Wonderland is so interesting and definitely reflects what Lewis Carroll started. If you love Alice in Wonderland, I definitely recommend this. It's just beautiful and sad and awesome. Another graphic novel series, and that is Sex Criminals by Matt Fraction and Chip Zdarsky. This one is so interesting and so fun, full of these two characters, Susie and John, who whenever they have sex can freeze time, and they discover this, they use this power to rob banks in order to save Susie's library. However, in doing all of this, they end up pissing off the sex police, who are these weird group of people who also have this ability, and they come to realize that there are other people out there who have this ability, and it just gets more interesting, and as the series goes on, you get to learn more about these other characters and their backstories and their lives. It's really interesting. It's such a different concept. I definitely recommend it. Obviously, this one is for more mature readers because it does get quite graphic, especially as the series goes on. I think these two authors just decided to get more graphic with their drawings, and definitely recommend it. The next book is another YouTuber book, and that is The Amazing Book Is Not on Fire by Dan Howell and Phil Lester. This is such a fun YouTuber biography. It's full of just randomness. It's laid out so beautifully with all sorts of different things. There's individual pages on each of them, but then a lot of it is all both of them together. It's Dan and Phil in a book. If you are a part of the fandom and you haven't read this book, I don't know why, if you were part of the fandom, why you wouldn't have read this book, but it is just such a fun book to read. I definitely also recommend getting the audiobook for this. And even if you really aren't a fan of Dan and Phil, I still definitely recommend it because it's quite fun, and I feel like you don't necessarily need to be major fans of them to read this book. We have a book that I always recommend to you guys, and that is A Rose for the Anzac Boys by Jackie French. This is such a beautiful, powerful and moving book about these young girls during World War I who are over pretty much on the front line in France and having to deal with everything that comes with war and the horrors of war, and it really just shows how women were involved in the First World War and that they too faced quite a lot of the harsh realities of war. It wasn't just the men on the front line who were so severely impacted by everything of war. It's so beautiful. We have Australian, New Zealand, English characters in here. Oh, it's just so beautiful. I definitely recommend it if you are Australian or if you are New Zealand to read this, and I especially recommend reading it in April around Anzac Day, which is when I read it. It is just so powerful and moving, especially to read it before Anzac Day and then to experience Anzac Day services with this story floating at the back of your mind. It's such a beautiful book, and Jackie French is such a beautiful Australian author. Then we have Boys South of Mason-Dixon by Abby Glines. I could not do a recommendations video without including a book by Abby. You guys know how much I love her books, and it was very hard to pick just one to recommend to you guys, but I'm definitely recommending this one. It is her more recent release. It's the first book in the South of the Mason-Dixon series. We are following Asher Sutton, who comes back to town after 3 years being away at college. He was totally in love with the girl next door, Dixie, but he found out a secret that meant he couldn't be with her, broke her little heart, and just left town. She has since moved on to his younger brother Steele, who is actually her age. Asher was a few years older than her, but when he comes back, he realizes he still loves her even after all this time, and she still definitely loves him. And it's such a beautiful book, and if you love new adult romance contemporaries, Abby is definitely a go-to author. It's just such a beautiful story. We get at the beginning, we get alternating perspectives throughout the whole book we get alternating perspectives between Dixie and Asher, and at the beginning we get we alternate between past and present. It's such a fun, sad, beautiful contemporary. If that is what you love, definitely check it out. Finally, we also have another new adult contemporary, because you'll know how much I love those books. This one is Royally Screwed by Emma Chase. We follow a young prince who has been told by his grandmother, the Queen, that he has until the end of summer to find a wife so that there can be a royal wedding. He is pissed off at this because he has always been told by his grandmother that she wants him to have the same relationship as his parents did, and, you know, find someone and fall in love rather than just choose someone because there needs to be a royal wedding. He ends up going to New York, where he meets, and I cannot think of her name off the top of my head, which is really bad. She owns a pie shop, and their first interaction involves her shoving pie in his face for his drunken comments. And they end up starting to go out. They both realize that even though they come from completely different worlds, they are very similar. And they see each other just for who they are rather than the titles and their background. And even though they know they only have the summer for this romance, they sort of fall a bit too hard and a little bit too fast, and they realize that it is something that can't last the summer, even though it kind of has to. But it's a really fun and beautiful book. Again, if you love contemporaries and romance and new adult books, this is definitely something you should check out. So there are 22 books that I recommend to you guys in honor of my 22nd birthday. I feel like if I keep going and doing this every single year, I'm just going to have to show you my bookshelves and say, read all these books, because I feel like it's going to get a little bit out of hand. But I hope you at least found something that might interest you. Definitely let me know what you think of any of these books that I recommended, and if there are any that you are interested in. I would love to know your thoughts if you have read them. And that is it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week with another video. Bye!